GitLab is the faster path from idea to software. It's more than a code repository. It's one workflow that brings development, security, and operations teams together. No walls, no endless feedback loops. Use GitLab end-to-end or integrate it with the tools you love. And it lets you eliminate the rest to help reduce costs and boost productivity at the same time without trade-offs. With GitLab, teams can build software faster, automate software delivery, shorten cycle times, and increase developer productivity. And security is built in, not bolted on. Scan for vulnerabilities with every code push, automatically. It's the entire development process, all in the same place where everyone works. Because we're on this path together. The path from idea to collaboration to higher performing teams. With one comprehensive, innovation-driving, fast and secure DevSecOps platform. Software faster. GitLab.
All right, let's go ahead and kick things off. Thank you for joining us this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're at. We're excited to have you on this session today. Wanted to start off with just a couple of housekeeping items. First off, this webinar is being recorded, so you can expect to see that recording sent to you here in the next day or so. Looking forward to sending that out. The slides will be included in that. Second item of business, if you have any questions that come up throughout the presentation, feel free to put those in the Q&A portion of your Zoom window, and we will answer those through that method. And with that, I will kick it over to our first presenter of the day, Francis.
Thank you very much. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. We're going to talk about the holistic approach to securing the development lifecycle today. Part of our methodology and ethos within GitLab is to talk through this holistic approach that takes into account more than just vulnerability scanning and talks about all the different types of governance and controls that have to be in place for a secure development lifecycle. So as part of this webinar today, we'll focus a lot on the concept of shifting left and actually demo some of the things that we do within GitLab on the platform to enforce some of the controls you selected with your shift left strategy. And we'll wrap up with an overall view of how we think about concurrent DevOps, which is not a thing that you do sequentially. So let's start with introductions. My name is Francis Ofungu. I'm the Global Field CISO here at GitLab. Part of my role is to help customers understand the secure supply chain, but also establish a center of excellence when it comes to security compliance within the AppSec world. Also be joining us, Anthony Barr, who is our solution architect, and he'll be going through the demo with you today, and also talking through some of the actual things within the GitLab platform that you can implement to secure your development lifecycle. With that, let's start off with an analogy. So a colleague of mine mentioned that building secure software is like building a house. We believe that houses need a concurrent number of things going on at the same time to build it efficiently and effectively, but also you need that central point of coordination, typically in a general contractor, that can help you source the right resources, the right people, and the right plans to effectively execute your house building plans in the right time and the right manner. If you've ever built a house, or if you've ever done any type of construction work, you know that's not always the case. It doesn't go as smoothly and as on time as you expect it to. And that's because a number of things crop up, like poorly sourced materials or different changes in regulations and legislations that stop you from executing what you want to do. But what that means is you have to react to those events. You don't stop building the house, you have to react effectively. And we think building software is the same way, building secure software. There are various things that can happen throughout the process, and it's really how you react and recover from those events that makes you as efficient and effective as possible in your software building process. So in my role as Global Field CISO, we have a lot of really good conversations with CISOs and development leaders to talk through what are the things that they're seeing as challenges or adoption blockers to actually shifting left, to actually building secure software. A lot of these items operate in two categories. There's at the program level, which I'll talk about now, and there's sort of the technical threat level, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So what we observe at a program level is there's typically this misalignment between DevOps governance objectives and what you're actually implementing. So from a compliance and audit standpoint, you have these governance objectives that have been set out by either an audit committee or your audit leader or your compliance leader. And those specific objectives don't always translate or communicated at the control level when it comes to your DevOps platform or how you're actually developing software. So those misaligned objectives become a surprise from an audit standpoint when at the end of the year or end of the quarter, you're doing your SOX, PCI, or your general audit requirements, and you find out what you've stated as a control objective isn't actually implemented. So those misaligned objectives always come back and essentially bite you at the end because you haven't communicated how you translate those specific objectives to controls. The other piece is there is no vision when it comes to a strategic approach to reducing risk. We hear a lot of people say things like zero trust and shift left and all the other, for lack of a better description, marketing terms that exist from a security standpoint, but that strategy hasn't been translated into a vision in terms of how you want to develop secure software. What we see over and over again is tool sprawl. One of our customers said it best a few weeks ago, like we're rich in tooling, we're poor in workflow. So you have a lot of tools out there that are supposed to help you with this shift left mindset from a scanning and vulnerability management standpoint. But without that central coordination of workflows and processes and capabilities to actually make that vision reality, it just becomes a tool management effort to make sure you have the right tools integrated into your secure development lifecycle, but also what you do with those results, who gets to see those results, who gets to pay down the technical debt that are flagged by those tools. It becomes more of a process and capability issue than a tool issue. So with that tool sprawl, it creates more problems than you initially tried to solve in the first place. This next one, this fourth one is a big one. It's just a lack of a formal SDLC, a secure development lifecycle. And what that means is there isn't a way to take all the things we've talked about already. So policies, governance, controls, and translating that into a phased approach towards developing secure software. What that then leads to is without that secure development lifecycle or lack of roles and responsibilities, and also budgets from a security uplift standpoint to match those risk objectives. So all these things tied together in sort of one perspective give us some of the program level issues that leads to a stalled security program or a stalled software security development lifecycle. And what we need to do is sort of shift the conversation a little bit to drive that meaningful change, to have a vision, to have that SDLC defined, to have those controls in place at a program level so that they translate well into a control and platform level. Because without it being defined there, then the actual implementation of those controls is sort of doomed to fail. So moving away from the program level for a minute, and as I mentioned earlier, Anthony was going to talk in more detail about these controls and how GitLab helps with some of these solutions. But at a holistic view of the secure supply chain, you're thinking about secure supply chain at the different phases, the different links of software development. What that means in practice is you're not just scanning for security vulnerabilities at the pre-commit level, and that's shifting left. It means you're thinking about source dependencies, build and release management, and thinking through the design and threat modeling of things that could impact your software development lifecycle at each of those stages. So what does that mean in practice? So these are just examples. This is not an exhaustive list. So if you're thinking about source code management, doing your threat modeling exercise, let's think of the things that could happen from a source code management standpoint to compromise your development lifecycle. So you have unauthorized users that could introduce poor code or bad code. You have compromised code or insecure code based on vulnerabilities you've used or that have been introduced by either copying and pasting the wrong code or introducing those vulnerabilities as part of a poor development workflow. You have exposed secrets and passwords or hard-coded secrets. These are things that can happen at the source code level that you need to identify as early as possible. So when we talk about shifting left, it's really thinking about this phased approach of detailing what are the threats that could impact at each stage of the development lifecycle and putting those controls to guard against or mitigate the likelihood of those threats being exploited. So at the source code level, it's really your version control systems, your quality scans, your SAST or your static scans, and also your secret scanning, but also having a way to control or harden the environment that you're developing on. So from a GitLab standpoint, that would be making sure you have the right access controls, making sure you're enforcing two-factor authentication, and really ensuring that the right things are being done at the platform level itself to start off your journey towards that secure supply chain. And extending the house building analogy a little further, in the dependency and build stage, this is similar to how you source materials and put together those materials when you're building a house. So if you remember from a few years back, there were recalls of lumber and wood flooring that had chemical treatments that were hazardous to health. If you didn't know how your materials were sourced or how your floors were sourced or how you actually source materials to build the house, and there was a recall of those materials and you didn't know how they were acquired, then you're not going to know you have a problem. This is similar in sort of the software building world, where if there is a Log4j incident of what we saw with SolarWinds, where vulnerable dependencies are being introduced into your software development lifecycle, the first port of call is knowing exactly what makes up that secure development lifecycle. So in this case is making sure you have the right software composition analysis, generating SBOMs, which at the federal level has become a requirement for federal contractors, and also knowing what license compliance scans are in place. But it also means isolating the build environment, making sure the right access controls are there and the right separation of duties are there in terms of who has access to that build environment, and building that attestation and release evidence that certifies or evidences that there has been a level of integrity throughout the build chain. And then when we come to release management or actually deploying your software, there are also things that you can do to ready that runtime governance that you have to think about when essentially deploying the software to customers. And that's not just a one-time event, that's going to be a continuous process you repeat every time you release a version of your application or software. So from a 30,000-foot view, that is how we think about the holistic approach to securing the supply chain. And we'll move on to a deeper dive around the technical controls that can be implemented within GitLab to talk through or to essentially evidence those controls in practice. So I'm going to turn it over to Anthony, who's going to give us that view.
All right, thank you so much, Francis, for the introduction and the overview of security of GitLab. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
You can't see me yet because I haven't put on the video, but here I am. As Francis mentioned, my name is Anthony Bear. I'm a solutions architect here with the Enterprise West team of GitLab. I'm located in San Francisco, California. Very happy to be here to show you about shifting security left within GitLab and a little bit about compliance a little bit later within the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. Folks may recognize this diagram as being the GitLab flow for DevSecOps, where we are able to cover the entire DevOps lifecycle from creating an issue to define exactly what changes you want to make to the code. And then from that issue, linking a merge request where the rubber meets the road and you're able to make any kind of changes to your source code, whether it's a defect remediation or if it's a feature that you're implementing. Then you commit those changes back into your repository. We have a pipeline that'll run as part of our continuous integration. And as part of that pipeline, we can include security scans to be able to look for any kind of vulnerabilities that you have within your code that you're modifying. This gives us the ability to be able to report on any of those vulnerabilities and be able to take action on those vulnerabilities as we're doing our development, thereby shifting our security effort left. We don't have to throw it over the fence to another department, if you will, that needs to evaluate the application for any kind of vulnerabilities. We can take action on those vulnerabilities early within the lifecycle instead of having to wait late into the lifecycle. And this helps us to be able to save money and time in remediating those vulnerabilities or fixing any of those defects. Another key aspect of the GitLab flow is the review app, which allows you to be able to deploy the application to allow for feedback for the folks that are involved, the stakeholders within the application, and collaborate to be able to understand, are these the changes that we expected and intended? Is the application still working as we expect? That ensues discussion, any kind of code and security reviews that we want to take place, and then approving changes. As Francis had mentioned, we have controls that are available within GitLab to be able to set such things as merge request approvals, that if we have high severity vulnerabilities that are happening within our application or within our change, we could automatically trigger a merge request approval to have certain individuals approve that merge request before it gets merged into the default branch that you see there, merged, issue closed. And then we run our deployment to be able to deploy into our environment and then be able to monitor the application. So as I had mentioned before, this moves our security testing as close as possible to the developer or early on within the life cycle so that we can remediate those vulnerabilities as quickly as possible. A little bit of housekeeping here too for folks that are on the live webinar today. If you have any questions or any comments that you would like to make, please use the Q&A section of the webinar to be able to post those. And then we will be able to answer within the Q&A section as well. Okay, so let's get on with the show. So a little bit of an overview of the different security capabilities that we have available within the GitLab DevSecOps platform is we have overarching capabilities that allow you to be able to have dashboards and reports to be able to view what types of vulnerabilities you're experiencing within the application, be able to triage them on the spot, track them within your organization. And I'll show you this within a demonstration. As I mentioned before, we have security MR approvals that will automatically trigger an approval for your merge request based on what definitions you'd like to put, if it's for high severity vulnerabilities, as well as critical, medium. It's customizable as you need it. We also have scan policy enforcement. So if you wanted to, for instance, do a dependency scan each time you have a code change, you could automatically put in a scan policy to do that. We also have secret detection. So if you have any kind of secrets that are embedded within the code, we could take a look through the code to see if any are disclosed within there and be able to show you that, hey, we've found a vulnerability here in terms of a secret that is available that you don't want to have within your application or within your code. We also have static application security testing, which will go through the code itself and look for any kind of vulnerabilities that are in there, such as logging into your application and not providing the right response, allowing folks to be able to put something in for the login, like a SQL statement, as in SQL injection, and then being able to draw out information from the application to be able to hack in. That's part of our static application security testing that we go through. And one note to make here as well is that a lot of the security scanning capabilities and security capabilities we have within GitLab are geared toward open source languages as well as other languages that we have available. So And when I say open source languages, I typically think of things like Python, and I think of .NET, and looking at repositories like pypy.org and so forth, but we support a multitude of languages. And if you have questions about specific languages that we support for different types of security capabilities, we're happy to answer them within the Q&A. So how's that? We also have infrastructure as code scanning to be able to look at any kind of infrastructure that you're setting up, because we know that according to OWASP, a lot of the vulnerabilities now are based on configurations that are done within the infrastructure as code. So we want to ensure that the configuration that we're making within our infrastructure as code is compliant, and that we're not leaving any vulnerabilities within there. Dependency scanning, getting back to my open source comment that I had made before. So looking at any kind of dependencies that we're including within our application, or what they call software composition analysis, to see if there's any vulnerabilities that have been reported as in using that specific component. And again, I'll show you this within the demonstration. We also have license compliance. So along with those open source components that you're including within your application, there are licenses that are associated with them. And some licenses you might not want to adhere to what the license compliance is. So they may have license compliance that says that you need to make your code publicly available if you use this open source component, and a lot of folks may not want to do that. We also have post-build scanning capabilities that are there. So container scanning. So if you have any kind of vulnerabilities that are listed against the container image that you're utilizing for containerizing your application, we use our container scanning capabilities to be able to look for vulnerabilities that are there. We also have our dynamic application security testing, or DAST, that allows us to be able to look into the application once it's deployed to see if there's any vulnerabilities that can be hacked in to the application from a dynamic application security testing point of view. We also have fuzz testing. We're able to input unexpected and malformed data within our application to see if there's any kind of vulnerability there. And then API security, so being able to test APIs to look for any kind of vulnerabilities that are associated with those. Okay. So a little bit of a screenshot from the project I'm going to be showing you later is a merge request. And the reason why I put this in as a screenshot is because this is where the rubber meets the road, where you're able to gain visibility into the code changes that you made from a security perspective, from a compliance perspective, as you see here within license compliance, and allows the developers or folks to be able to take action upon these vulnerabilities early on within the development process. So here's the merge request. In the middle of the screen, you'll see that we have code quality that's listed there. We also have license compliance that's there. Our security scanning is also there with a whole ton of different vulnerabilities that are there. And because this is a demonstration environment where we're able to show you all sorts of different vulnerabilities that we have found as a result of developing within our application. Here is a screenshot that I took from a pipeline that was run within our application. And here we have all of the different jobs that are associated with the pipeline that are listed under the different stages. So the stages are build, unit, test, CFuzz, production, and DAST in this instance. Underneath there, you'll see all of the different jobs that are associated with those stages. So build, unit, code quality, code container scanning, Python dependency scanning, etc. Then, and within all of these different jobs that we have, we can double click on any of these jobs to see the output from that job. So for instance, SBOM is a hot topic to be able to understand the inventory of the different open source components that you have within your application. If you were to double click into the dependency scanning job that we have here, you would find that there's a JSON output of a Cyclone DX formatted SBOM that gives you a complete inventory list of all the different open source components that you have within the application. So the pipeline allows you to be able to see the output of the jobs, also that the job's completed successfully. All right. So as I mentioned and kind of precursed for the SBOM is that as part of our security effort, we also have a dependency list that's available, which is the SBOM for the application. So this appears within the GitLab environment. And if I were to go ahead and drop down on any one of these components, you'll see that I've got several different vulnerabilities on these components. I could see exactly the vulnerability information and be able to take action on it directly from this dependency list. So that allows me to be able to remediate faster and also ship security left. So I wanted to also show you a little bit of a preview of our demonstration with our review environment. So this is the review environment for our application that allows folks to be able to have feedback to our application. If they see something in here that was unexpected, then they could note that within the merge request and say, this isn't exactly, there's something missing here. I wasn't expecting the simple notes. I was just expecting notes, etc. So this gives us the ability to be able to review the application even before we deploy it, again, saving time and money. All right, so before I go into enforcing compliance, let me give you a little bit of a demonstration of GitLab itself. So many folks will recognize the GitLab environment that we have here. Here I've got a DevSecOps workshop project that I have underneath a group here called Security Lunch and Learn. And that's under another subgroup that I have here, but I won't go ahead and jump into. But I wanted to give a moment to be able to explain group structure. So groups allow us to be able to designate specific projects within different parts of an organization, if you will. It also allows us to roll up the results of those different projects, not just from a project level, but from an overarching level. So if I were to go into the Security Lunch and Learn group, I could look at my security and compliance dashboard there to be able to roll up our DevSecOps workshop project that you see here and any other projects that you have. And similarly, for groups above the Security Lunch and Learn, I could also roll up the information from there. So that's a quick introduction into groups and what that's all about. And here we have our project information. So this will show us exactly what activity is taking place within our project, our labels and our members of the project to provide visibility to the folks that need to have visibility into the project. This also works within a group level as well. Here we have our repository. This is where we have our code that we are modifying. And this is the screen that you see now that has all of our different files that are associated with building the project. Here we have our issues. So this is where we define exactly the changes that need to be made within our project. We can provide collaboration there for folks to be able to collaborate on the issues. We also have project management that's available, such as creating boards to be able to see if you're using agile development to see what sprint is associated with a specific issue, etc. We also have merge requests. So I had shown the screenshot for our merge requests earlier that we have our information that's there, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that in just a second. We also have our continuous integration and continuous deployment that we have our pipelines, and that was the screenshot that I showed you before. We have our jobs. We could also schedule pipelines to run at a specific time, etc. Here's where we have security and compliance. So this is where we have our security reports and dashboards available to be able to look into our application, as well as at a group level to be able to roll up that information into our groups to be able to see across the entire group what our security is looking like or our vulnerabilities are looking like, etc. We also have our deployments. So as I had mentioned before about the review environment, this is included as part of our environments for the project that I will dig into a little bit deeper after I get through the introduction of GitLab. We also have our packages and registries. So this allows us to be able to store our binaries that we're building within our application, as well as utilize containers that we build within our application locally, instead of having to go out to the outside world to be able to get those. We also, here's our infrastructure. If we are utilizing Kubernetes, we could attach to a Kubernetes cluster in this case. Here's where we monitor our application to be able to find how our application is doing. And then another important part that to take advantage of as part of the DevSecOps endeavor is our analytics that we have built in to GitLab. And this is where we can show exactly our analytics as it's associated with our CI/CD efforts, any kind of code review, how our issues are being managed in terms of how long it takes to close them, how our merge requests are doing, how long it takes to have those closed. We also have a wiki available that allows us to be able to create a wiki directly within the project to be able to document and share with others that are involved within the project to have something that's not entirely within the code base, but a reference that we can get to, snippets, and finally settings. So let me go ahead and dive into our merge requests here. So here I have just two different merge requests. I'm going to go ahead and open up the one that I had for the screenshot. And as you see, when I open up the merge request, I've got exactly what changes have been made to the application from a merge request perspective. I've also got the branch that's there, and then this is their intended merge target. So our main or default branch that I've got. I also have the pipelines that I have associated with the project. So here I can look into the pipeline status in order to identify how our pipelines have run as a result of this merge request, what things have changed. And let me go ahead and get back to that in a little bit. So I also want to show you, let me go ahead and open this, our pipelines. So this is related to the screenshot that I had shown you before. That is our pipeline that is run with respect to our project. And it's nice to be able to be in the pipeline. And here we see that we've got actually a compliance job that was included as part of the pipeline. I'll get to that a little bit later when I talk about how our compliance projects work and compliance frameworks. But this is the same information that I had shown you on the screenshot before, but here we're able to interact directly with the pipeline in order to see such things as what kind of outputs that we have for our application. So here, as I had mentioned, we have our dependency scanning that took place within our application. This gives us an output of what the job accomplished. We also have our job artifacts that we have available within our dependency scanning that allow us to be able to see what's there. So if I go ahead and browse here, I can see that this is our SBOM, basically in Cyclone DX format, that gives us the ability to utilize this. It's basically a data file that we can input to see what vulnerabilities are there. So the pipeline becomes an important resource to be able to see exactly what jobs have completed, what jobs have not completed successfully, be able to see the output of the jobs themselves. Again, giving you visibility into your DevSecOps process. So let me go ahead and transition over to our security and compliance dashboard. The security and compliance, or I'm sorry, yeah, the security dashboard gives the ability to see exactly what types of vulnerabilities are being reported. You see as I hover over all of the different branches that I've got here, that I can see how many critical vulnerabilities I have, how many high vulnerabilities, medium, low, etc. That give me a trend chart, if you will, for how well those vulnerabilities are being remediated within my application. Digging a little bit deeper, I can check into my vulnerability report. That gives me the ability to be able to see where my vulnerabilities are coming from. I can also filter this as I wish to be able to look at what severity levels I have for my vulnerabilities, so that if I only wanted to look at critical vulnerabilities, I could select this. Also, we have a filter for our tools. So what types of security vulnerability testing that we've done, we could filter it by those vulnerabilities. Other thing of note, if I click on one of these vulnerabilities, I have the ability to be able to create an issue or add it to an existing issue to be able to assign someone to remediate it, be able to triage this quickly within our life cycle so that we could not have to wait for something to be remediated. We also have our CVE information that's included that we could look into to see what type of information we've got there. So that's the vulnerability report that allows us to be able to see our vulnerabilities as well as assign them as issues for folks to be able to work on and also plan. Let me go ahead and show you our dependency list. So here we have our dependencies that are included as in part of the application. And as I had mentioned from the screenshot that we looked at before, if I go ahead and drop down within one of the components that we've identified, we can see what types of vulnerabilities have been reported against these components. We could also do the same that we had before. I can create an issue to be able to remediate this vulnerability so that I have the ability to be able to remediate these as quickly as possible within our dependency list. So we also, and I'll get into this a little bit later, we have audit events that are available as part of our compliance that allow us to be able to see what different audit events were tracked against this project. But what I wanted to show you is this part of the demonstration are the environments. So here we have our environments for our application that allow us to be able to see the application deployed before it goes into production. So here I've got a completed pipeline environment that has been created as part of the pipeline that it ran before. If I click on open, I see the application running within the environment that was created for that pipeline. So here I can make any kind of comments that I would like as to, I was only expecting notes instead of simply simple notes, so that we could be able to collaborate and remediate any kind of defects that we find within our application. Just wanted to make sure everyone can see my screen okay. I normally see a border around it that shows that I'm sharing it. I don't see that right now. So hopefully you guys, I'm sure someone would have told me by now. But these are our...
And Anthony, we can see your screen, but if
Okay,
you
great.
could expand it into full screen mode,
Yeah.
we're seeing your whole screen right now. So much
that
better.
better?
Thank you. Yes.
And then I should have asked as well, can you see the text okay, or should I bump it a little?
Looks okay from my end now.
Okay, good. Then again, our packages and registries. So this gives us the ability to be able to store any kind of containers we might use, and then also our infrastructure to be able to connect into our Kubernetes cluster or Terraform or Google Cloud. All right, so let me go ahead and go back to the presentation. Okay, let's see. And then continue on with our compliance. All right. So after the security, again, if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to use the Q&A so that we can be able to address them for you. So let's talk a little bit about enforcing compliance within our DevSecOps process. So getting back to the analogy that Francis was painting before in terms of our house building, living here in San Francisco, as you can imagine, every once in a while we get earthquakes. So we need to ensure that our houses that we build comply with different standards that we have within our state regulations. So we have such things as Title 24 that we need to comply with. We need to comply with earthquake standards, et cetera, such that buildings can withstand those types of issues. And you can probably imagine you want to live in a house that's compliant and not that's earthquake proof, if you will. So license compliance becomes important within our application development, as I mentioned before, because you want to ensure that you don't have any restrictions in using open source components or any kind of liabilities for having to publish your application as an open source project. It also allows you to be able to set rules on what to allow and deny within your licenses. And we also have audit compliance to be able to see what types of activities have taken place within our project, as well as enforce jobs to run as part of your pipeline that we had seen earlier within our pipeline project. So as part of enforcing jobs within our pipelines, how we do that is we assign a compliance framework pipeline that allows us to define what jobs we want to run with every pipeline so that we can ensure that we have specific jobs. A lot of times this is used within organizations to ensure such things as SAST testing takes place when a code change is made, or DAST testing, et cetera, so that we can enforce and ensure that these types of scans are taking place so that we can remediate any vulnerabilities as early as possible. And I'll show you this within our project as to how that security compliance framework project works and the compliance framework that's associated. Okay, so let me go back to my demonstration environment to show you that. Okay, so here I am back in my demo environment. Let me go back to full screen so folks can see it. All right. although it's not the right tab that I want to be on. I want to go, and well, this will work too. Okay, so here I am back in my project itself. Let me show you how you set that. If I go into my settings here, and you'll need to have a maintainer or owner privilege to be able to get to this. But here I've got a section within my settings called Compliance Framework. And if I expand on this, I can see that I've got a DevSecOps Compliance Framework project associated. You can create a number of compliance frameworks depending on the type of jobs that you want to associate and have run within the project. In this case, I just have my DevSecOps Compliance Framework associated with the project. So that affords me that compliance job that is included as my project. And where does that come from? That comes from, okay, here you see the label as well that shows it's compliance framework. That comes from the project. I have to do a little Zoom shuffling here if you'll give me a moment. Here.
Hey, Anthony, just real quickly, it looks like you went off full screen again with the presentation. So.
Oh, good. Thanks, Taylor.
No problem.
It's hard to get to those other tabs. I got to do the dance here. So here's my compliance framework, and here's where we have our compliance pipeline defined. That allows us to be able to include exactly what type of compliance jobs that we want to include as part of our pipeline. So here we've got a compliance job defined here, and you might have seen this within the pipeline. I'll show you that in a little bit that where that ran. But I've just got a simple one here that just says, okay, echo message from compliance framework. So this is a very specialized job that we have defined that allows for this job to be run as a result of running a pipeline within our environment. So that's where a compliance framework, and this is where you can define that compliance job to run. Go ahead and do the dance again to go back into my project here. All right, go back to full screen. Okay, so let me show you that pipeline again to recall as to what that pipeline, the compliance job that ran within the pipeline. You'll see it here. So this is exactly the compliance job that we had defined as part of our pipeline. If I go ahead and open it up, I can see that I've got my message from compliance framework that was included as part of my pipeline that was ran, so that I have that there. And let me show you actually as well, while I'm here, is our GitLab CI.yaml file in order to show you how you include those security testing steps within your pipeline. So GitLab has a mechanism that's built into the product that allows you to do such things as include templates within your project. So here I have a template section that's included as part of my pipeline that allows me to define what templates I want to include within a project. So you remember that I have SaaS testing as part of my project. I included that by included in the SAST template that GitLab maintains that allows folks to be able to include within our projects. This can also be extended, if I like, to be able to define a specific scanner if I want for that, either the SAS testing or the dependency testing. So these templates become a way to be able to include jobs within your projects without having to write the steps yourselves within your GitLab CI file, so that you can immediately include these as part of your project. So you see I have container scanning, secret detection, etc. that's available within my project itself. So that gives you the information as to what is included. There's also auto DevOps available within GitLab that allows you to be able to have these templates automatically included as part of your project. What auto DevOps does is it takes a look at your repository, it identifies what language that you're developing within, and then selects the appropriate jobs associated with the language that you are creating, so that it becomes a way to be able to automatically build and deploy your application within GitLab. All right. So, okay, so in conclusion, what we've seen already within the demonstration is I've taken you on a tour of GitLab in terms of the GitLab flow itself, taking you on a tour of the repository, the issues that are there, the merge requests, CI/CD, and the pipelines that are associated, security and compliance with a security dashboard, as well as the vulnerability report and the dependency list. We also took a look at our different environments to be able to deploy our application within the branch itself, instead of having to wait for it to be merged into, oh, that's something that I should show you as well, is our merge request approvals. So going down the list, it reminded me to do that. So within our settings as well, we can create our merge request approvals to be able to see exactly what types of, if we have any kind of vulnerabilities that we have. Let me go ahead and go up one section here. If we have different vulnerabilities that are there, we can set merge request approvals. Oh, I should show that within the merge request too, that there's an approval section here that you show exactly, okay, who needs to approve this change. But we can create a merge request approval, so we don't have any changes here, so we don't have to worry about that. But we can have a merge request approval that scans for our different vulnerabilities that we have there, and we can create that as a high level, a medium, or a critical severity, or any type of level that you've got that you want to create a merge request approval for. So that was what I wanted to show you within the merge request approvals too. We also went through our compliance and we took a look, oh, which reminds me, our license compliance. So if I go into my pipelines, again, I can do this also within the merge request. I could have done that there too. But here we have our license compliance section that's included as part of the pipeline that we ran. And here we have the ability to be able to set what type of policies that we want to have within the licenses that are identified as part of our open source components. So here we have a LGPL license that we want to deny. If I wanted to, I could include an additional license policy in here to be able to deny for licenses that we have here. So maybe if I find an MIT license, they're usually okay, but if I want to be able to flag it, I could also have it be denied, such that I need to ensure that an approval takes place for this. So I have, okay, here's where I can search for what groups I want to include within my list of approvers. So maybe I just want to select myself as an approver, but I could do that. So I can add an approver to this. So now I have a license approval that is associated. So again, this is part of our DevSecOps operations, that if we come across a license that we don't want to have a liability for, or we don't want to have in our application, this will automatically put in a license approval that needs to take place in order for the merge request to be merged. Okay. And then within our policies, as I had mentioned before, our scan policy, I don't have one set right now, but this is how you do it. You can create a policy that will automatically run as part of a scan execution policy to, for instance, run a DAS scan on your application whenever a change is made. So, okay. So that's what we talked about in terms of security within the compliance. We talked about the compliance project. We also talked about the compliance pipeline that's included as part of the run itself. We also talked about how to assign that compliance framework to the project. We also talked about groups, and we talked about the roll-ups. So a lot of information here that we welcome your feedback on and look forward to speaking with you more on. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing the screen and go ahead and allow Francis to continue on. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Anthony, thank you so much. That was a breathless overview of everything that we're doing from a security and compliance standpoint within the platform. What we want you to take away, as well as what Tony just said, is this is not something you're going to build in one afternoon or 1 week. Implementing all these robust tools for secure software development will take some level of investment. And going back to those items that I talked about earlier, which is at the program level, making sure you have the right direction and governance to drive implementation of a lot of these controls that Tony went through, will be the recipe for success, because without those governance and program execution plans, trying to do all these things in a vacuum will lead to some of those failures that we talked about earlier in the presentation. So part of our conclusion is, if you're thinking about DevOps and this shift to this new paradigm, think of the security and compliance piece as moving away from sequential to concurrent. Sequential used to be you had the ability to do scanning and pen testing of vulnerability management, either in production or at the end of your development lifecycle. With this shift left mindset, you're shifting left, but you're also doing things in a concurrent manner and not waiting for your SaaS to be done, waiting for other things to be done before you move on to the next security check. And that's where those CI pipelines come in handy, because they give you a way to templatize exactly what needs to be done, but also enforce that they're being done at the right times and by the right people. Now, you're going to have instances where you need to approve some vulnerabilities because of compensating controls, or the cost to remediate that vulnerability is way higher than it needs to be because of other compensating controls like WAFs or security checks you've done from a code review standpoint. You want to document those events concurrently as well. You want someone within your development lifecycle to approve that you're accepting those vulnerabilities. So exception management becomes an important part of that concurrent DevOps approach, which means you need to have people that are there to review those exceptions in real time, so you're not delaying the velocity or reducing the velocity of your development process. So we believe that this platform, our platform, allows you to work together with dev and security, allows for that collaboration because you're all singing from the same hymn book. You're all on the same platform, looking at the same things, not security having their own tool somewhere in a different console and dev having their own tool. Everyone is seeing within the same pipeline exactly what is being flagged up and what needs to be remediated. And developers are empowered to act, because at your merge request level, you're seeing what vulnerabilities are being introduced and creating that accountability for what needs to be remediated prior to pushing into production. And with that accountability, you're embedding security and training in context. As opposed to doing a secure development course, you're training in context of the things that you need to do to be a better, more secure developer. So with that, we're going to be wrapping up here. We understand that this is a significant lift for a lot of companies that don't have either the resources or the availability or the capacity to drive some of these programs forward. And we have a professional services team that is here to help with some of the challenges or adoption blockers that may exist within your teams today. I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but the summation of this is we're here to help. If you have questions or you need engineering resources to help you triage vulnerabilities, identify processes and workflows that work for your organization, or even help with the implementation of approval rules within that workflow, we have people on hand that can help with those types of tasks. We have contact details of our senior manager for professional services attached to the slide and the recording, and you can reach out to those individuals. And then lastly, as we wrap up for the last few minutes of this, we will have a feedback poll that is available to you, and just general real-time feedback to this session. Please use it before you log off from this session. We appreciate any real-time feedback and the Q&A that has been going on in the background throughout this process. So thank you very much for all those questions. Hopefully you're getting answers to those in the background as well. But yeah, as we wrap up, thank you, reach out, let us know if we can be of service or have more one-on-one conversations about your DevSecOps journey and your whole securing the development lifecycle. Reach out to your customer success managers and we can talk through with them, or bring myself or Anthony on board to talk through some of those practices that you're trying to develop. But also we have future webinars and workshops we'll be doing to help expand on this topic, because this was only an hour and there's a lot covered in that hour. We'll take these topics in chunks and do a deeper dive into some of these concepts in future workshops and webinars. And we also have a YouTube channel that has some detailed prior recordings for some of these topics as well. So with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you again for your attending today, and look forward to talking to you all soon.